All right. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me already, my name is Matt Roble. I'm the business unit leader here at DSI. And for those of you that do know me, it's great to talk to you again. A couple housekeeping items before we get going today. I'm going to ask that everyone please make sure that their lines are muted so we can keep some unnecessary noise distractions to a minimum. If you have questions as we go through the material today, please just type them into the chat feature of the Zoom here. We're going to get to as many of them as time allows at the end of the session, but I will be tracking them. And if we don't get to your question, I will make sure I follow up with you offline and get you your answer. We will be recording today's session, and afterwards we're going to send out the recording to everybody. Please feel free to share that recording around to others that you think may be interested in what we are discussing here today. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let me once again welcome you to today's webinar, Background Checks in the 2022 Labor Market, a Changing Mindset for Employers. We're very excited to discuss this topic with you today, as we know the entire world is struggling to hire and retain employees. This is forcing employers to get creative, not just in the obvious areas, such as sourcing and pay structure, but also looking for some of those less obvious opportunities to improve your processes. In today's webinar, we want to discuss how your background check program can actually be used as a tool to help overcome some of your hiring challenges, rather than being an obstacle to filling roles. We're going to discuss the conventional mindset and how employers who have been looking at their program a bit differently have been able to stand out from their hiring competition. Today's presenter is John McTighe. John runs our background screening operation here at DSI. He has more than 2 decades of experience in the industry and is an active member of several industry associations, including the Society for Human Resource Management, or more commonly known as SHRM, and the Professional Background Screeners Association, where he was part of the team who helped write the standards for the accreditation program in the background screening industry. John is a frequent speaker about background screening compliance and best practices at human resources events across the country. He has achieved the Advanced Fair Credit Reporting Act certification from PBSA and has achieved similar certifications through the National Consumer Reporting Association and the Consumer Data Industry Association. And if that wasn't enough, I'm also proud to call John one of my very best friends in the world. Now, before I turn it over to John, the lawyers make us show this crazy little disclaimer here and remind everybody that we are not attorneys and nothing we say should be considered legal advice. You should always consult with your actual in-house attorney prior to making any changes. Now, with that, I'm going to give it over to John and get going on the topic.
All right, fantastic, Matt. Thank you very much for the introduction and getting us started with the housekeeping items there. I think this is going to go good. We have a lot of slides to get through today, so we'll make sure that we get through this quickly. But I'm hoping that at the end we get some great questions for people throughout the process. So let's get to it. So essentially what the presentation today is going to do is I'm kind of breaking it into the 2 sections shown here on the agenda. We're going to focus first on some of the challenges that HR is seeing in 2022 and maybe some of the last quarter of 2021. We're going to talk about some of the factors that are going on there and some of the areas that I think could be real damaging potholes for employers. And we're going to dissect that, and then we're going to kind of work that into what can you do to improve the process and some of the surprising things you might be able to do just simply with your background screening to really address some of these issues head on. So again, broken into sort of 2 parts, but that's what we plan to do. So let's talk a little bit about the state of the U.S. hiring market. I think this picture sort of sums it up. If you're a recruiter out there looking for job applicants to apply, you've probably wondered this yourself. Employers are facing a labor shortage right now like we've never seen, and it's really not expected to improve anytime soon. When you talk about the current shortage of workers, the term "the Great Resignation" is the buzzword. Gets a lot of attention. In fact, it was the cover story in HR Magazine this past summer, essentially telling employers that huge swaths of your current employees are going to leave in search of greener pastures. And it seemed kind of scary at that time. And unfortunately, it's turned out to be a real thing. Employers are experiencing high levels of turnover. There's a survey conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers last fall that found that 65% of workers were in fact looking for a new job, or get this second part here, or they were planning to look soon. So I think it's not quite over yet in terms of the amount of turnover that we've seen, and it's probably going to continue through this year. Well, so, what I want to talk about now is that I think employers, you might have experienced this great resignation a little bit. You've seen a spike possibly in turnover as well. But I honestly think the better term for this would be the great reprioritization. Hold on a second here. My slides are a little out of order here. 1 second here. I've done something, Matt, to screw it up, but let's see here. Give me 1 second here, folks. I apologize for the problem that's going here. I seem to have lost a slide in the mix here, but I can talk through it if we don't have it. Let me just see if it's just out of order. I can just swap it around here. All right, well, what I was going to tell you was that I think the better term for this, and what the next slide basically said, was the great reprioritization. And what's happened is, I think applicants have come out of the pandemic with just sort of a new view on work. And I think it's less the typical reasons for turnover. Usually are employees are just frustrated with situations in the workplace. And but really what's happening here is that they've sort of reshifted their priorities. So the term, the great reprioritization, is probably a better way to describe it. Applicants now are looking for more flexible work. So they might be leaving a current employer in the 9 to 5 in an office because they want to work from home. Or they might be looking for other things in an employer in terms of the relationship that they might have. Maybe another employer might be helping them with some sort of bonuses or something like that related to school. That's one factor for sure, and that has been drawing a lot of people into new companies, and that they've left because they've got a mountain of student debt. And they just don't feel like they're ever going to be able to get out from underneath it. And they're shifting towards employers that can meet this need, and some have actually hung it up altogether to go to something like a gig economy or something like that. It's been pretty crazy out there in terms of how the priorities have shifted. And we as a result of this have seen a lot of crazy things going on in the past 6 months to a year. I just want to give you a couple of cherry picks of a few that I've seen that I thought were apropos. Number one, the National Guard's been called in some places. The job shortages have been so bad that they brought the National Guard in, and states have activated them to drive school bus drivers or serve in nursing homes in medical roles. And I've even heard about the government considering them using the National Guard to help with supply chain issues and things like that. So you rarely see the National Guard get called in a situation like this, but it's been done. It's happened. We're also seeing some crazy things out there. It's a natural reaction to worker shortages to see employers sort of increasing wages. Typically, employers will report an average salary increase in the range of 2.5% to 3%. But in the past year, the new normal has been closer to 4%, with significantly higher increases in some occupations that are in real high demand. How bad is it when McDonald's in some locations are paying more than $20 an hour? And we've seen stuff like this around the country in some fast food and hospitality positions as well. Another thing that's gotten a lot of attention has been signing bonuses. Before the pandemic, SHRM typically showed the percentage of employers offering signing bonuses to be in the range of it's usually in the 20 percentile. And then if you dig deeper, it's usually for very specific positions that they have been using them as a tool to attract for. However, last fall, a survey by Global Data showed a year-over-year increase in the number of job postings that mentioned the signing bonus by something like 450%. I feel like we've got somebody that's not muted. Just there's a little bit of background noise. So just want to remind people, if you're not muted, just please mute. So anyway, these signing bonuses are popping up all over the place. In today's market, it's not uncommon for positions to see bonuses in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. And heck, I even saw one in Forbes magazine that they were talking about where there was a $100,000 signing bonus. The only question is, where do you get an application for that one, right? So I can't even imagine that. So also, in addition to signing bonuses, it also kind of goes in hand with that employers would use retention bonuses and things like that and such. And I wanted to share something really creative that I saw, and I'm not sure if this is a problem at your company, but I thought this struck me as very interesting. We've seen a few employers that have been trying to target a problem in their business where a new hire came in and didn't last. So hires were coming in and just turning over relatively quickly. And so what they did was they implemented a bonus program for existing employees that within the department where they had hired the person, if the new hire stayed past 6 months, everybody in the department got like $100 bonus, I think was the number I saw the employers using. And I thought this was kind of a cool way to get everyone sort of rallied around a new hire. So that could be an interesting idea for you if you've got that situation happening where new hires aren't panning out. It's super frustrating because you've spent a lot of time recruiting them, getting them through the process. You've invested in training, and then if they're like, "I'm out of here in a couple of months" or whatever, that's a real setback. So the idea of that sort of departmental shared bonus could be an interesting one. So I thought I'd share that. And then lastly, another big challenge that we're hearing from employers is basically about how competitive the fight to win job applicants has become. Frankly, many employers who just haven't adapted their process and they're still doing it the way they've always done it are losing good at candidates in today's market. It's super competitive out there right now. A recent study conducted by Career Builder found that more than half of employers reported losing an applicant because of a negative experience with the hiring process, some sort of a slow or clunky process or something difficult or challenging in the process. And it just makes you ask, how user friendly and how applicant friendly is your process, right? Are you is there a lot of steps and a lot of things that an applicant might be like, that seems hard. So you might want to think about that. We've also heard employers report that slow hiring processes, people have just swooped in at the last second, at the 11th hour, and grabbed candidates, sometimes that they had offered the position to already, and even had them say that they would accept. And then, slow processes for the background screening had cost them the candidate that because the person just said, "Hey, I'm going to go start over here since they can bring me on." They still felt like, because they hadn't started, maybe that it was still up in the air a little bit. So, I understand there's some stuff outside your control, such as the challenges we felt with drug testing labs during the pandemic. You guys don't control that. That was a real difficult time. But there are a lot of things that are in your control, and we're going to talk more about that as we get onto some of the positives here that we can help with, that can help you be faster. With that, we actually were going to do a poll, but we had a hard time getting that set into the system. We had trouble, and for some reason, I'm getting a little clunky situation with the PowerPoint today, but this slide just won't go away. So anyway, we deleted it, and it sure does look deleted over my presentation, but yet here it is. So anyway, why don't we just move on here? And we'll talk a little bit about one other thing that is going on out there as a challenge. This is the last of the negative things that we'll be talking about, and we'll get out to some solutions that will help you. I couldn't resist. I'm a compliance guy. I get really involved with this piece of it on what the employer responsibilities are for this background screening. So this is I just couldn't pass up this opportunity here to try to work a little bit into the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I think that's or you probably know that's the overarching legislation that employers need to comply with at the federal level when they're doing background checks. And there's just been a lot of litigation around here. You could see the trend here sort of leading up to it. There was a big spike in the 2015 timeframe where the plaintiffs bar really realized that these cases are rich for them. It's easy to win. And it doesn't cost a big investment for them to get it, and they can usually get thousands of dollars. It's more lucrative than many attorneys that focus on accident work and things like that. So, and you can see that trend has sort of continued on through future years here. And I just got the statistics in for 2021, so I'll include them in the presentation today. We've hit an all-time high watermark with 5,406 cases related to the FCRA. This past year, and it's out of control, and there's some things that employers really need to do to just make sure their house is in order. So let's talk quickly about what that means. What are the core requirements for employers? Most of the rules, I'll tell you, in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, this is like 100-page document. If you're ever having trouble falling asleep at night or something like that, pull out a copy of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It'll solve your insomnia. Most of the rules in this lengthy law are pointed towards us, the background check company, right? So there's a lot of things that we need to do in terms of ensuring accuracy and handling disputes and the way that we operate our business. But there are a couple of core obligations for employers, and these are areas where we see employers getting black eyes for what seem like fairly simple things. So the first of which is the disclosure and authorization. I would say take out a copy of your disclosure and authorization that you're signing. How old is that document? Is it one that you scanned a PDF of 10 years ago, and that's what you've been sending to applicants all along? Because there's been a lot of legal changes in those forms as some of the rules have changed around it. So you may be out of date on that. And the FCRA has always required that there be a disclosure and an authorization. And the rule has always been that the disclosure needs to be this clear and conspicuous document that consists solely of the disclosure. And this has been a problem that a lot of employers have experienced, because it's basically they've gotten sued because they were having applicants sign this sort of combined disclosure and authorization document where it was all sort of baked into one bit of language. And so essentially, this can be problematic if you don't have good separation between these documents. It's an easy win for a plaintiff's attorney that's coming after you, and it's just really a matter of how many times they can prove on discovery that you've used the faulty form, and that's probably good for at least $1,000 a form that you've had signed. So you definitely want to get on that situation by looking at it. And if you want some help, we'd be happy to look at your process a little bit more deeply, looking at your documents. All right, that's something we're good at. Another problem that employers have felt beyond the disclosure and authorization has been related to adverse action procedures. These adverse action notices aren't that complicated, but employers sure do get knocked around a bit. Now, first thing I'll point out, notice that notices is plural. This is a common mistake where employers are only using one form, or occasionally we get the deer in the headlights look and they're going, what form? We don't do any of that. So that's definitely a fix. But there's two notices that are required, and timing really is critical here. The first notice is called the pre-adverse action notice, and just like the name sort of suggests, it happens before you take adverse action, right? That's right there in the name. But employers get this wrong. They'll get back the results of the background check. It'll say something concerning, right? That, maybe some serious crime, and they'll be like, oh, sorry, we're rescinding that job offer. They'll tell the applicant something that sounds like they've just kind of pulled the carpet out from underneath them. But the reality is you're supposed to first give them a copy of the report, the notice that you might take action, and give them an opportunity to dispute the information that's on the report. Now, I can tell you with our stuff, we have this microscopic inaccuracy issues, and there's usually some good story behind it. But so we're really detailed on making sure that we find that this is a true match to your subject and stuff like that. But essentially, you want to make sure that you have this process happening beforehand, this pre-adverse action notice, and then after the fact. Um, once they've had that reasonable chance, which most people tend to think is about 5 days, they've had a chance to dispute it. You send the second notice that they're unless they've introduced something new, like maybe they show that it's not in fact them. But so you've got to get these things right. Separate disclosure and authorization, no extraneous information, and then the two independent notices with the timing right. All right, that's been a real problem area for employers. And another thing that's sort of new here, it's not just federal laws to be aware of anymore. Several states have entered the fold as well, passing new laws that employers need to be aware of. For example, ban the box. You may have heard this term, but this is a national movement aimed at delaying an employer's ability to ask about previous criminal convictions. And this continues to grow nationwide. 5 or 50, almost every state has accepted it in some capacity, but often that's for public employment and things like that. But 15 states have passed laws that absolutely affect private employers, which is where I'll focus on today. And you sometimes find that as a contractor providing services for the state or federal, that these requirements can trickle down to you as well. So you want to be aware of the ban the box rules and that you're complying. In fact, the patchwork of laws that's coming up all over between the 15 states and 22 cities and counties, it's caused many employers to just say, we're not going to do this anymore. And they stop asking the question just because they're not sure where they're hiring from. They might get an applicant tomorrow that's in one of these states or counties, and they just want to make sure that they are not going to be in trouble there. So a lot of people have just removed it. Another thing that's sort of new, the new trend has been the emergence of state fair chance laws. These are a little more sophisticated than the ban the box laws. The requirements of these types of laws vary, but typically they're requiring an employer to have a process of ensuring that any criminal record found has a bona fide relationship to the job in question, so that it's not just a flat automatic ban, but in fact that you're linking the two, that this is related. All right, so and some go further than that, require the employer to consider additional factors such as rehabilitation efforts and things like that. So that's definitely something to you'll want to investigate and such. And we do help with that a little bit. In the state law, we basically, for those of you that are customers currently with DSI Medical, this probably looks a little familiar on this picture. That's the home page right here. And I've circled here this guide to background check rules. We pay for all of our clients to have a legal subscription. And part of that has, there's a lot of bits of advice and updates and alerts that come out on that. But there's also a breakdown by state of these ban the box and fair chance rules that you can see. What are the, you get a summary, as well as citations to the different laws and things like that. We pay dearly for it, so you should definitely take advantage of that if you're not already using it. All right, so I wanted to just sort of end the sort of bad news of things that are going on here with this compliance thing, and let's just sort of summarize here what we're looking at here. Basically, turnover has increased dramatically. It's getting harder to find qualified applicants. This is a problem that so many employers are feeling. And the applicants that are available have higher expectations. They're looking for increased wages or increased flexibility, or they might be looking at other factors that are out there. Like one that I wanted to mention is that employers or applicants are looking at heavily. And that missing slide I mentioned before, that I don't know where it went, but that missing slide had a little bit about the growth of applicants wanting their employer to be more socially responsible. And a matter of fact, millennials, who represent over half the workforce right now and are expected within about 5 years to make up 75% of the workforce, 81% of millennials say that they choose their employer because of their stance on public issues or how much opportunity there is to participate in social causes at work. and it's huge. And that's never really been a big factor before, but it's a key thing for employers now. Applicants are demanding more, and this might be an area where you can look a little bit more closely at things that you can maybe allow them to participate in, or ways that as a company you could become more socially responsible. You also might lose qualified candidates in today's competitive hiring market because of delays, or maybe you have a non-user friendly process or something like that that's just having them fall out at the last minute when it's most frustrating. And then the last slides I just went over, let's not forget that there's a bunch of compliance rules out there that could put you in a really hot water here. So I think that's everything. I think I've covered it all. So instead of focusing on the bad, let's do what my mama used to always tell me, to focus on the good stuff. So let's get on to the positive stuff here, and we'll talk about ways that we can improve in these areas. Ways that you might be able to change your mindset on a few things that you're doing now that you've probably just gotten into a rut on doing it, and how changing some of those things really could have a dramatic impact on the engagement you're getting from new applicants, the number of new applicants, and whether or not they stick through the process as well. And it could even, we could even help you, uh, do something maybe to the extent of that social responsibility stuff as well. So we're going to talk about all of that in the coming slides here. All right. So first thing is let's talk about your process for background checks at your company and see if there's a way that maybe we can improve on that. I'd ask you, what does the process look like at your company? And honestly, DSI would love to have conversations with you about this directly, and see if maybe we can find ways to make it a little bit better. But is it smooth and streamlined for HR, or is it easy for the job applicant? These are things you should be asking yourself right now. Oftentimes, when we look deeply at the process that employer is using, we see stuff that looks like the diagram up here at the top here with the squiggly line here. Not a very straight line, right? That's not the way it should be. But we see that all the time. We'll see employers send email a job applicant a paper background check form that they need to sign. It's the disclosure and authorization, and a form where they provide their information. So they'll send that to them. So the applicant's now got to print this out, fill it out, and this document's going to have to include sensitive information like social security numbers and stuff like that. The applicant signs this stuff up, and then they need to figure out how to scan it to you and send it back to you. And a lot of times applicants have trouble or have concerns with that because they're sending it often through email. And particularly younger applicants are very sensitive about sending secure information through insecure methods. So you definitely want to think about that. Then after the applicants had the hard time, you've got to now read their handwriting and data enter the form. And you've ultimately now got a paper form that you need to store somewhere. So the first thing that I would talk to you about is, if you're using a paper method like what I just described, you ought to look to making a shift to electronic. It can make things a lot easier. With a couple of clicks, you can send a message with a secure HTTPS encrypted link to the applicant. The applicant then, in that secure setting, which the millennials and Generation Z love seeing that lock padlock encryption on the stuff than when they're providing it. They basically will sign the necessary forms. They'll provide just the information that's needed. A lot of times those forms ask for a bunch of extraneous stuff that, like, you might not be checking on an applicant's driving record, but you probably ask them for the license number just in case. So instead, when you use an electronic method, it's usually what's being asked for is only the stuff you're intending to use. So if you didn't order a driving record, like our system, for example, wouldn't ask for a driving record number. So that's just a couple of things that you could look at. We would another thing that I mentioned is about sometimes those forms that get emailed around, have the applicants fill out, are sort of out of date. They're the same form you've probably been sending for years. So when we do it electronically, we queue up the most up-to-date FCRA forms and gather the information that way. So, no paper forms, no need to scan anything, and the HR team doesn't have to data enter anything. It just automatically flows into the system and starts right away. Even, like I'll look at our background check system, and we get orders 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's because the applicant is filling that thing out on the couch in the middle at night when they've got a free moment to get things done. So the system works beautifully. And if you're not using electronic, you definitely want to take a look at it. We talked earlier about Career Builder's survey about how employers often lose applicants when the system is not user friendly. It takes a long time. How do you think, like this is a common picture that you see here. How do you think an applicant would rate your process, right? Would you get a smiley face? Would you get the kind of straight line face or the unhappy face and stuff? So, you got to really look at that process. The move to electronic can instantly improve your game. What's cool about it is one of the things that we do now in our system is we text the applicant as well. So when the process starts, we can actually send it to them via text. And wouldn't you know, the younger applicants absolutely love that. We'll have emails that we'll concurrently send the text and the email to the applicant, and they'll never even open the email. But the texting and instantly responding to that, they're like, "Oh, I got a text," and they'll go in. So that's definitely a cool way, and the system works great from a mobile responsiveness. So I don't know, I don't want to belabor the point, but I love talking about this piece of it because it directly addresses a couple of the key problems employers are seeing in the 2022 hiring market by making it faster for HR and more user friendly and more compliant by ensuring you got the right forms. There's no security issues that you got to worry about emailing stuff around or storing it and stuff like that. It's a step in the right direction for you. Another thing in terms of revamping is you might want to take a look at that at what you're sending to the applicant. All right. So in today's tight job market, employers, you can't afford to lose anybody, right? Especially at the end of the hiring process. It's so painful to have someone get right to the end and you offer them the position, they don't accept it, or they accept it and then 2 days later they say, "Oh, I've changed my mind, I'm going with somebody else," or something like that. So you might look at the communication that you're having around your background check to try to figure out ways to make it more engaging. So we talked about on the prior slides the benefits of making the switch to an electronic forms process, and we have electronic forms. Other background check companies too also can do electronic forms, but it's usually a very cookie cutter sort of approach, and it's just they might as well say, "Dear applicant, click this link to provide your background check stuff." It doesn't even have their name or their information and stuff like that. Sometimes it doesn't have your company name. Oftentimes it'll come from the employer. So just you want to look at that process and try to see is it given them the wrong impression right out of the gate. So what you might do is you might ask us, you might want to look at the current default forms that we use, and we've tried hard to make these engaging and stuff, but they are sort of somewhat generic. So we can give clients the ability to modify these forms. So if you want to write it differently, add some additional things about how excited you are to welcome them to the team, and this is one part of the process. This is something that we allow our clients to do. You could request edits on this, or you could even include branding on it. So something so that it can not only have your name and information, but you can put some logos and stuff on there just to make them feel good about, hey, this is great. I'm starting at this new company and they love me. So that more personalized feel can really go a long way. And the other thing that that employers have engaged us about is status. There's been a common complaint. One of the things that comes up from applicants I'm talking in general, industry wide for background checks, but applicants often complain about they don't know where the thing stands. So it just kind of goes into a black hole. They fill out that form and then they never hear about it again. So some employers have asked us to build in status notifications so that the applicants can basically be updated on where things are, and you can even arrange it so that the applicant gets a copy of their completed report. They love seeing that. It's like pulling your own credit report or something like that. You You love going through and seeing stuff and seeing what other people see. Applicants really like that, and that's something you could communicate. Like, hey, we're gonna run the background check, but if you want a copy, you can click here to request it, or something like that. So this is something you might again consider in terms of the customization to be more engaging with those applicants. So I do think it's definitely got potential to engage them a little bit better, really be a continuation of probably all the good things you did in the interview process to try to make them feel like they'd be part of the team. Now you can really insulate them from other people trying to poach them. And so, we talked earlier about, you can how the slow process and stuff like that can't you don't want to lose anything, but the electronic and paper can really hit the bullet of improving the time to hire. The shorter you make that time from when you're extending that conditional offer and starting the background check to when it's ready to be able to move forward and go on that, the shorter you can make that process, the better. And that's I don't want to brag too much on the site, but that's something at DSI that we do great. We have a couple of things that we do that are I think really good. That electronic system is one, will really speed the process, and that's something we offer for free to our clients to be able to use that. So to make the move from paper today, if you're on paper still, and you might even engage it further and customize it, things like that. That most companies just have that cookie cutter. We can really get in there, but other things that affect the time to hire are things like the domestic service team. The support that it's needed sometimes. The applicant might need something, you might need something, and a lot of times this is being handled by cheap offshore call centers and things like that don't really know yet. The person you talk to today might not even work there tomorrow. You probably never talk to them again. The boutique sort of feel that you get in terms of service from a company like DSI really can help get through the process a little bit quicker. So that's good. And in addition, we find that the domestic verification teams also makes a big difference for us in terms of speed. People aren't as quick to call back. I think when they're dealing with a number they don't recognize, or it's it sounds like it's an offshore sort of situation. So I think we get a much better response, and people are very quick to get back with us, and that goes good. And sometimes people are concerned about security too when things are offshored like this, and I'd agree with that. You want to be able to account for sensitive information that you might have on applicants, like their socials and stuff like that. Who's actually seeing that? So that's one thing that I think helps us. The domestic verification teams is key, but there's also a research method that we utilize that I think really stands out versus competition. When we compare, we're oftentimes we can be days faster than some of the competition. And one of the reasons that happens is the way we approach searches of county courts. We insist on having multiple researchers in every county every day. And so what that means is we're able to feed multiple researchers on a sort of like a round robin sort of approach, and so that they're getting fed. But this makes sure that if one gets COVID, we're not dead in the water. We have got somebody else to deal with, or if somebody decides like we were talking about, they decided, hey, I don't feel like working anymore, that's it for them, and they exit the workforce. We want to make sure that we have options. So in every county, we've got multiple researchers, and we have an electronic way we dispatch to them. Now, competition, what a lot of them have done is they've transitioned to try to, for the accountants have mandated it, but it's for savings for them. But essentially what they've been trying to do is run it themselves with employees, and then they're experiencing all the same problems that employers are feeling, where people don't show up for work or quit or leave or want to do something else. So it's got flaws right now post pandemic, but it's also flawed in the fact that they're trying to have an employee in this court today. Tomorrow they go to this court. The next day they cover this court, and then the next day after that they're back to the first court. They're just built in a process that sort of cycles through courts, and there's automatically a couple of days in the process. And instead, our approach gets that in their hands usually the same day. You can even get the results back sometimes the same day. So we're super fast in that regard for tremendous depth in terms of the searches that we perform. So that's something you might want to look into, is the methods that are being used, because it can have a big impact on the time to hire. And so time to hire was there. The other thing that we thought we would talk and sort of end with today was about finding more applicants. Essentially, that's really been the name of the game, right? Throughout the presentation, we've talked about several factors that have been causing worker shortages in the U.S. And how that's going to likely continue. But now I want to talk a little bit more about strategies for finding applicants. And maybe we can help make you move from, something that looks like this to something that looks like this. So, when employers look a little bit more closely, they often find that there are some things that they're doing which are inadvertently missing certain groups. These include older workers. This might include women returning to work after being a caregiver, and it might also be veterans or applicants with a criminal record. And so these are some areas that we want to talk about. One area that employers sometimes find is that it's their own filter settings and their HRIS system that's part of the problem. And another issue is that maybe you're just not looking in the right ponds. You're not fishing in the right ponds for applicants. Maybe you need to make some adaptation here. So why don't we look at these for older workers, women returning to work after being a caregiver, veterans, and candidates with a criminal record. And let's try to see if we can give you some good places to look for those sorts of applicants and some other techniques that you might utilize. Okay, so let's start with older workers, right? We talked earlier about how the working age population in the country is sort of shrinking, but the population itself is not shrinking, meaning that there's a surplus of older workers around. So, it's actually been given the name the silver tsunami. That's getting thrown around a little bit, but could you have to ask yourself, and it doesn't work in every position in every company, but could older workers fit in at your company? Maybe there's an opportunity to do some things that could help you. And sometimes you can find some skills and some methods of doing things that new people don't even know how to do. So if that's interesting to you, AARP's got a good job board. You might try to get your postings out there. And there's also a number of different community agencies. You can usually, with a little bit of effort, find agencies right in your backyard that are trying to help applicants sort of older workers sort of rather get into the workplace. Another thing is the women returning to work. So many professional women are highly skilled, right? And but they've had their career sort of interrupted to take care of a child or a loved one that might be sick, and they make a difficult decision to sort of eject from a career that was probably going in a great direction, and then they're gone for a little while. This was especially prevalent for women around the pandemic, where they suddenly became school teachers at home for kids and stuff. It really changed things quite a bit. And so this might be a population that you might be able to find that could help you. And you can find placement firms in every state that specialize in helping women return to the workplace. Or a good website you might check out is the Mom Project. That's one that exists out there. That could be themomproject.com, might be useful. And many employers say that they have success with this group by specifically targeting postings to moms that are in this situation that are returning to work. So anyway, that you might try that on LinkedIn or some of your other postings to try to see if you can maybe make a little adaptation and get that. People find that those postings get passed around a lot, going, "Hey, Mary, weren't you looking for something?" Or, "Hey," that kind of stuff gets passed a lot more than the other stuff that just sort of falls like a tree in the forest that no one hears. women to returning to work, there's a lot of things that you might do. We talked about veterans being an applicant pool that might be useful to you. So there's a lot of job boards out there that are dedicated to the military. And one of the most popular is recruitmilitary.com. So if you're not posting there and looking at that, you should take a look at it. You might find some great applicants in a new area that you're not even looking at. The other thing you might do is talk to your Department of Labor office in your state, because they usually have good programs specifically aimed at that, for within the state. So they're usually a great source in that area. So if you're not already engaging with them, that's an area you might check. And then the last one of the items that we wanted to talk about were the candidates with a criminal record. It's another big area where employers' mindset needs to change. And honestly, a lot of employers are suddenly looking at this. So if you're not, you could be behind the eight ball here. You might be lagging. So you may want to consider this group and give it a fresh set of eyes, right? For years, I think employers have been using background checks as trying to find a reason to exclude someone. And you're trying to get something in the background check to be like, and maybe that works when there's a whole surplus of applicants and you can be picky, but it's really a candidates market now, and you got to really sort of shift your mindset, and you got to look for ways. I'm not saying just throw risk out the window. It doesn't mean hire every criminal that walks in your door, but I think there's some really good ways, and we'll talk about in the coming slides, that you can do this and be more inclusive people that have a criminal record, because there's some hidden gems out here. These guys are diamonds. Some of them can be diamonds in the rough that'll turn out to be great employees. So if this is an area that you want to get into a little bit more, take a look at your pre-screening questions that you might have. I mentioned before that several states and jurisdictions have sort of a ban the box rule, but not every state and not every jurisdiction. So you might be asking questions on your job application about whether there's a criminal record, and that's a quick way to get usually for employers that do ask it, that usually gets them in the no pile. So you might want to rethink, why do I do this? What's the benefit? Maybe there's some great rationale. If you're driving armored cars or something like that, or there's some really good reason for it. But in general, most employers could probably draw the line in a different place on the scale. So and by the way, that I mentioned that ban the box, it could be illegal. So looking at pre-screening questions is one area. HRIS filters, kind of like the women returning to work, gaps in employment that someone might have had if they were out of work or incarcerated for a period of time. The HRIS system programming on a lot of these systems can see that and low score them or omit them from the process for not having the right experience and such. So if you want more of these applicants to filter through, you might need to make some adjustments in that in those HRS filters, because that could be part of it. And maybe there's some new sources that you want to look at for this group. So there's one that I like called honestjobs. It's .co actually, not .com. So honestjobs.co, and they literally have millions of resumes right now, and a lot of employers are gravitating over here to make sure that their postings end up out here. And the site's getting a lot of positive attention, because not only is it just trying to help matchmake them with the job, but the site itself is working with those applicants to provide some additional resources that they might need, that helps their any work that they're going to do to be more successful. And that could be help, for example, with transportation, or help with housing and things like that. So it'll help link them with great resources in the area. So it's a pretty cool website for employers. And I mentioned before about how applicants, from a social responsibility perspective, really like an employer that's doing some good things. This criminal records and kids being more of a second chance employers, are giving people a shot. Even if you don't accept everybody and stuff, you still screen them and are careful. But if you draw the line a little bit different, this could get a lot of positive attention for you. So anyway, I wanted to put that out there. And I'll also share with you a resource here. if you're interested in this concept of hiring folks with a criminal record, there's a great book that I highly recommend called Untapped Talent by Jeff Korzenick. Jeff's a great guy. And he's sort of an unlikely hero, honestly, in this space. He's an investment banker. He leads actually one of the investment firms out there, one of the big ones, and it's a giant firm. And here's this guy writing books on second chance hiring, and he's got some real strong feelings, and he turned it into a great book. And like a true businessman, he didn't write a book about how, there's been a lot of books about this, talking about, they kind of tug at your heartstrings, and they talk about the social responsibility aspect of it, things like that, and they almost try to guilt you into it. But this is not, doesn't do that at all. It's not a tug at the heartstrings book. It's a business book. And he makes a great business case for why employers should do this for some positions. It talks about significant benefits employers have found in terms of retention and engagement from hiring people with a criminal record. So here's something I want to throw out to you. If you're considering this, if this is an area that you're have some interest in, then you email us at screeningsupport@dsimed.com. I'll say that one more time, screeningsupport@dsimed.com, and we'll get a copy of this book out to you. How's that? So a little freebie for those of you that are going to use it. Reach out to us because this is it's really a great resource. I loved it. It was a good business book. So now on the prior slides, we were talking about how considering folks with a criminal record might be the socially responsible thing to do, and how there's a business case to be made for how it opens up new applicants who are more engaged. And as you'll learn in that book that I was talking about, they can be more engaged, and they stay at the employer often longer. Now I want to talk to you about something else that we do here at DSI that's pretty unique and that we bring to the table. So if you're interested in the concept of trying to redraw the line on how you make decisions on criminal records, we can help you devise what we refer to as a preliminary adjudication matrix. Sounds exciting, right? But the preliminary adjudication matrix for your company basically would identify the criminal records that you deem irrelevant. And usually when you're doing that, you're identifying the crimes and after what point in time you consider them to be irrelevant. So this is how you might communicate to us that a certain type of case that's over 7 years old isn't relevant, or this type of case, if it's over 5 years old, isn't relevant, or this case, if they were a minor, it doesn't matter. So you basically identify it for us, the ones that are irrelevant, and then that by default, the remainder would be ones that you require more information on, basically. So that now, flash forward, background checks come through our system, and we'll automatically apply your preliminary adjudication matrix criteria on the report. So if we'll indicate if there's a criminal record found, we'll tell you whether or not your corporate policy says this is one that you accept, or if this is one that needs further review, and which employers find speeds the process dramatically. It's also obviously consistent, so that you're not doing something on Monday that is different than what you did 2 Thursdays ago. But it's also fast, right? Because normally a criminal record comes back and the recruiter wants to ask this manager who wants to ask this other manager, and it starts this whole like runaround where people are trying to figure out, what do we do? So you'll know right away if you've deemed it irrelevant. And if it is relevant, you want more information, we can even help you by sending the required pre-adverse notice. That harkens back to the compliance slide that we had previously about how there's a crackdown sort of on employers following this process correctly. So we could send that notice for you the minute we realize it's one of the ones that you need more information on. So it's a possibility. We'd fulfill the pre-adverse for you. And then we could even even reach out to the applicant for you to gather additional information known as the individualized assessment process. And that's basically where you look at extenuating factors and their rehabilitation efforts so that you're getting, and in addition to that, you're trying to gather more information from the applicant about what happened itself. I don't know, for those of you that have seen background checks before, they're like a half a page long typically, and they only have core high level data about what the crime was, when it happened. And this is how you get more of the detail to make a good, informed final decision. So there's a couple of things that DSI does that for those of you that are interested in trying to redraw the line on the use of criminal records, we could help you devise this matrix, apply this scoring, and then even take on some of the heavy lifting for pre-adverse notice fulfillment and trying to gather individualized assessment data for that final decision from the applicant for you. And basically everything on this page will help you with all of this for free. So that's a unique thing that you get from DSI that you're not going to find someone else that'll do that for you. So and we talked earlier today about some of the state compliance rules that were popping up all over. This is already a problem, and it's going to get worse, where the states are requiring you to have this process of being considerate to whether it's job related. So this whole process solves that. So it's definitely something you should think about. All right. So with that, I'm going to bring up our last slide here. We're going to open things up to questions. So Matt, I'm going to take a drink of water and I'm going to leave it to you.
Sure. We did have one question around the pre-adverse section. Is if the system is set to automatically provide the applicant with a copy of their background check, does that relieve the employer of any requirements centered around pre-adverse notifications?
That's a great question, actually. It does not, because the requirement for pre-adverse would require you that you just provide a notice, a copy of the report, and another document called a summary of rights. I don't think, I'd say that if you're looking to potentially deny someone, you want to make sure you've dotted these I's and crossed your T's, even though you could probably argue, oh, we've already sent it because we provided them a copy of it. I'd probably go through the motion anyway, just to make sure that they had it and not just lean on that. I haven't seen that tested anywhere in a court case. So I tell employers to be vigilant about pre-adverse action notice with a copy of the report and the summary of rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And we'll help you with that too, as well. Even if they don't want what it was on the last slide where we were talking about that, we just still give them an easy way to do that in the system too, where they can send that complete notice at the touch of a button. The sending it to the applicant is just a benefit for communication. The hope is that 90% of your applicants have a good, clean record, and this is just one way to engage them on the process and make them feel good about it by giving them a copy of it.
Just as a reminder, if you do have some questions, feel free to type them into the chat. Won't keep you too much longer here, but we do have a couple other ones here. John, could you talk about what is available in the way of ongoing employee monitoring, and is that a way to be more lenient in the front end of your decision-making process?
Possibly. That's a decision you need to make for yourself as to whether or not you want to potentially, take a different risk stance and then monitor, hoping you don't find it. The idea of monitoring really doesn't come from so much from a lowered risk tolerance that you're going to take more chances and then find out later. But instead, the idea of monitoring is just the presumption that on day one, you're checking this applicant, they get a green light. And then is the assumption that nothing's going to go wrong since then or after that, during the course of employment. Things can happen. People can fall on hard times financially, while they're your employee. They could get into other trouble or mixed into other problems and stuff like that. Next thing, they turn to theft or drugs or some other types of things. So employers usually bring on monitoring as sort of like a control, so that they just aren't saying one and done. So in the transportation space, which represents a significant part of this group on the call here today, you're used to checking driving records and things like that on an annual basis, but you could implement monitoring of those driving records on a real-time basis, so that as as new records are found or added to the driving record, you're alerted. So you could catch it at the end of the year when you do your annual check, or some people are like, not good enough. I want to know that as it happens. And they opt into something along the lines of our monitoring. So that's one area. On the criminal side, it's also an option there to be able to do monitoring on an ongoing basis as well. And that has had mixed results, or mixed, not results, but mixed acceptance around the country. We've seen it with work in many industries, but not in others. But that's a pretty easy thing to do. You're essentially just looking at their record, and if something new gets added to one of the systems, you can get alerted in that sort of situation. So it's definitely an available way to do it. And I do think that there's some logic to not just assuming that they were good today, so they'll be good for the rest of their life, and that there's no risk-based thing that's going to come up. That's a way we see employers get burned all the time, where they'll, like, if you're not checking driving records on maybe it's just a regular driving position, and then suddenly there's an accident and you find out this person's had 15 speeding tickets, you're going to be the deep pockets that they're going to come after. So there's an immediate liability, and you not knowing isn't a good defense. So you want to, I think there's a definite home for monitoring, but I don't think the two necessarily have to go together. Back to your question you were asking, Matt, as to whether or not people are lowering the standard in order to catch it later with monitoring.
Okay. Last question that we have so far is, with regard to that individualized assessment, how frequently are you finding that applicants are actually responding and providing you that information as part of that inquiry?
That's the $64,000 question there. Can I still say $64,000 question? I think we got
It's not a lot of money anymore.
It's not a lot of young, or we got a lot of young people on here too that probably never heard of that TV show. Yeah. But anyway, the $64,000 question, that is a great one, because it's so funny. It's become, as we've been providing this service for employers, it's become sort of a way that that applicants are sort of opting out of the process. So imagine you get back the criminal record, right? And we've applied your adjudication matrix, and it's something that you need more information. So we reach out to the applicant going, hey, we'll fulfill that pre-adverse action notice and say, we don't want to just make this decision on just the record. We're trying to gather some information. So, give us more information around what happened about that criminal record, and tell us a little bit more about what positive work experience you've had since the completion of your sentence. Tell us about what other rehabilitation efforts like education that you've done, or what other things have you done. And it's funny, you ask some open-ended questions, and the applicants that are going to be all stars for you will be the ones that take the time to go jump in on that individualized assessment and answer the questions, and be like, here's why you should take a chance on me, and here's why. And they'll have good answers around what it is and what they've learned from it and what they've done to rehabilitate themselves. And there are many that are just like, that sounds hard. And they're like, filling out, it's really not hard, but they'll be like, I don't want to fill out a form. All right, you got me. And I think, honestly, that's it's more than half of the people that we try to do individualized assessment with opt out and don't want to take the time to do it. And I think that sends a tremendous message. You are giving them an opportunity to put an additional spin on it, and they're just being like, whatever, they're too lazy to do it. So that's tremendous. You know everything you need to know, pretty much, in my view. I don't want to make the decision for you, but they're basically telling you they're not going to work hard and they haven't learned a darn thing. So I think that's where employers can really start doing some criminal records, or including people with criminal records a little bit more, and lean on these other processes for an individualized assessment, and try to see how well the applicant engages and what the true stories are behind it. I'll share with you really quick before we run out of time here, Matt. One of the best stories we've ever had at the time that we've been doing this. We had a guy that got on his record. It was he was an accessory to armed robbery where somebody was injured. I think and I don't think they were killed, but they might have been shot or something like that. So it's pretty serious. Well, in looking into it a little bit further, you found that this guy was, in fact, in the car. It wasn't in the store. Didn't actually pull any trigger or anything like that. But he was part of it and charged heavily, and basically was in prison. And during the individualized assessment process, this guy sort of articulated how it was the best thing that had ever happened to him in his life, because he'd probably be dead by now. It was the catalyst for changing him. He talked about how he'd grown up in a gang-infested section of an inner city, and basically in prison. He talked about how he had put himself through. They had allowed him to complete his GED, and then after his sentence, he got his associate's degree, and he went on to elaborate about how he's now mentoring kids in the inner city about getting out of that before it's too late. So it's rare, right? Now, that situation is not common, but if you just judge that guy based on his background check, you would have been like, oh, no. But you heard the additional parts of the story, and I know that employer did take a chance on that person, and it was a good move. He's been promoted a couple of times, and it's worked out great. So there are hidden gems in here on the criminal records that you can work on, and the individualized assessment process is a great way to get at it.
Great. All right. Well, we're up a little over time, but I appreciate everybody who stuck with us here. As a reminder, I will be sending out the recording of the session to everybody. You see our email addresses on the screen. Anybody who wants to ask questions offline or engage in some deeper discussions about your particular program, we're happy to be of help to you and walk through the process. We're actually pretty confident we can find efficiencies in your process, and really help you guys out on this topic. So again, thank you for attending, and we look forward to talking to you again in the very near future. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.